There's a guy eating turnips in the barn.
What? Dad!
Please do not shoot me, witch. I'm sorry, I wonder, may I speak with your husband?
No, you can't. Go get Grandpa. Go. Stay right there. Don't move.
The man's probably got a name. Who are you?
Well, I'm Sarah, and that is my father, Calvin, and Henry.
Well, where are you from originally?
I would say here.
Okay.
The story began by introducing a young widow named Sarah who lived in a small town with her father, Calvin, and her only son, Henry. It was known that her husband died when Henry was still in the womb. But, despite this difficult situation, she never complained, and she raised Henry with great love. Then, to meet their daily needs, Sarah and her father managed a family farm that had supported them for generations. One afternoon, when Henry was about to close the chicken coop, he was surprised by the appearance of a strange man standing behind the door.
Mom?
Because he was afraid, he quickly ran home and told his mother that there was a thief in the chicken coop. Upon hearing that, without thinking twice, Sarah quickly took her gun and went to the coop to confront the thief. However, when she saw the man, she was surprised by his appearance, as the man was dressed strangely, had long hair with a thick beard, and looked more like a beggar than a thief. What was even more surprising was that when she shone a light on him, the man looked terrified and thought that she was a witch.
Please do not shoot me, witch.
He even thought that she was a man because she was wearing trousers instead of a dress, which clearly confused her. When Sarah saw the wound on the man's head, she suspected that this person had just been hit by a hard object and lost his memory before getting lost on their property. So, out of pity, she brought him food and treated the wound on his forehead, which showed her kindness. After that, the man apologized for entering the property without permission and then introduced himself as Rip Van Winkle. He admitted that he did not remember where he came from or where he was going. However, he mentioned that when he arrived in this village, everyone looked familiar, and he thought this place was his home. Upon hearing Rip's story, Calvin suspected that perhaps Rip was the son of the Harrison family of the village, who had been reported missing while serving in the military several years ago, especially because their physical characteristics and ages were very similar to each other. Unexpectedly, Rip admitted that he had indeed served in the military, but he did not specify exactly where he had fought. Not long after that, a local sheriff named Ted arrived at the farm after Sarah previously contacted him to help identify the strange man in her house. It was revealed that Ted actually had feelings for Sarah for a long time, and that was why he was so quick to arrive when she needed his help. After Ted heard the story, he decided to take Rip to the office to have his fingerprints taken and then look him up in the police database. However, when Rip was about to be taken to the office, he was shocked to see a carriage that could run without a horse, referring to Ted's sheriff's car. This reaction caused Sarah and Ted to exchange glances in confusion. Once they arrived at the police station, Ted immediately began the identification process. However, it was very strange because no data for Rip was found in the national database. Therefore, he tried to send a photo to the military headquarters in case they could identify the man. After that, he took Rip to the hospital to check on his head injury, but strangely, the doctor did not find any signs of a concussion or any other trauma. Physically, Rip was completely healthy, but he continued to act in a very odd way. It was as if it were the first time he had ever seen sophisticated equipment in a hospital. Not long after, because there were no further instructions, Ted eventually left Rip in the hospital for his own safety and for further observation. In the middle of the night, Rip dreamed of seeing a small child with an old man, and then he woke up because his dream suddenly moved to a battlefield. The next morning, Rip left the hospital without the doctor's knowledge and returned to Sarah's farm. He admitted to Sarah that he could not rest in such a foreign place, especially when he felt like a prisoner of war because officers in white uniforms came in to check on him every 2 hours. He also explained that one of the reasons he came back was because he had forgotten to say thank you for the food Sarah gave him the other night. Seeing his polite behavior and his way of speaking, Sarah believed that Rip was not a bad person, so she decided to give him food and let him stay on the farm for a while. However, in return, she asked him to help her with some of the chores, which was a way to replace the farm laborer who had resigned a few days ago. Rip happily did whatever Sarah asked of him, and he even performed his jobs very well. Not long after that, Ted came to the house because he had received a report that Rip escaped from the hospital. Upon meeting Sarah, he explained that he had not yet succeeded in revealing Rip's identity because his fingerprints were not in the national data, and his name was not recorded in any military archives. He was worried that Rip was not an ordinary person and feared his identity had been deliberately erased, much like a terrorist. However, Sarah's instincts told her that Rip was a good person. She thought it was possible that the man experienced trauma or PTSD due to a war, so she decided to let him stay until his memory returned.
You really have no idea who this guy is. First sign of trouble, you call me.
Of course.
Well, I will pick you up on Saturday at 7, and in the meantime...
See ya.
See ya.
Besides, she really needed a worker, and Rip's presence was quite helpful to her. Ted did not mind her idea, but he told her to report to him once a week to check on the condition of her family. After Ted left, Sarah tried to find out what the missing man looked like so she could compare him with Rip. However, because Rip had long hair and a thick beard, they had a very difficult time comparing the two faces. To solve this, she and Calvin decided to take Rip into town to get his hair cut and his beard trimmed. Then, after the haircut, they tried to match him with the missing man again, but they soon realized that Rip looked nothing like the man in the photo. Sarah then asked Rip again who he was and where he had been assigned during his service in the military, asking if he had been in Iraq, Afghanistan, or Russia. However, Rip admitted that he did not know those names. He instead explained that he remembered his service during a war against the British in Delaware, which surprised everyone because that war happened several centuries ago. Later, while they were on their way home, Rip felt strange seeing the city looking so busy and modern. His curiosity made him want to follow anyone he thought was acting strangely, so before he could cause any trouble, Sarah hurriedly took him back home. That afternoon, Rip once again proved that he was a hard worker and very reliable on the farm. This work ethic impressed Sarah, so she decided to make him a permanent worker and provide him with a place to stay. Then, when Rip saw the house where he would be living, he claimed that this was the place where he grew up.
This is where I grew up.
However, Sarah denied this because the house had been in her family for many generations, but Rip still stayed firm in his stance, as he knew for sure this was the place. They then went inside, and Rip was surprised to find that the interior of the house had changed a lot compared to when he last left it. However, even though things were different, he still remembered the wood carvings he had made on the wooden walls when he was a little boy. The carving said Rip Van Winkle too, and included the year 1758, which he claimed was the year of his birth. The statement from Rip gave Sarah and Calvin goosebumps, because, even though it sounded impossible, the carving seemed to be a convincing piece of truth that Rip was telling them the truth. Sarah then told him that the year was now 2022, and she explained that it was impossible for a human to live for more than 250 years. Upon hearing that, Rip fell silent for a while before he finally fainted due to utter confusion. After Rip regained consciousness, Calvin gave him a book that contained the story of a man named Rip Van Winkle, a famous folktale that seemed very similar to the story Rip was currently experiencing. After he finished reading the book, Rip realized that the story was actually about his father. He even knew the names of some of the characters mentioned in the book. He then once again emphasized that he was indeed born in 1758, and in his mind, the current year was still 1787. Later, after further investigation, when Rip was only 8 years old, he was given the name of his father, who was Rip Van Winkle Sr. Then, one day, his father and mother had a big fight, which had become their daily routine. Irritated by the argument, the father then went to the forest to calm down, but that was the day the father left them forever. Since then, Rip worked hard to replace his father and run the farm where they lived. Then, when he was 17 years old, Rip was called to the battlefield to fight for the freedom of America, where he was shot in the middle of the war. Although the war was devastating, Rip managed to return home safely and went back to being a farmer. As time went by, his mother eventually died of old age, while his younger sister got married and moved away from their house, leaving him alone with a fairly large piece of farmland to take care of. For years, Rip lived in solitude until one day, his father suddenly returned home after being missing for almost 20 years. However, strangely, the father had not aged at all and looked exactly the same as he did when he first left. The news of his father's return caused a great uproar among the local residents, especially because he didn't age at all, despite having been missing for decades. His father then shared the mysterious story of what he had experienced with the residents, explaining that while he was walking in the valley, he found a cave that had a bottle of wine inside it. At the same time, there was a terrible flash of lightning, so he decided to take shelter inside the cave. While he waited for the rain to stop, he then drank the wine and fell asleep shortly after. Shortly after, when he finally woke up, he found that the environment around him had changed drastically. Even his son, who was only 9 years old when he left, had grown up to be 29 years old. Upon learning that, he finally believed that he had slept in the cave for 20 years without aging a single day. However, even though Rip Sr.'s physical appearance was proof of his story, no one actually believed him, including his own son. However, because he swore that the experience was real, Rip decided to go to the cave to prove it for himself. When Rip arrived there, the rain suddenly began to fall. So, whether he liked it or not, he was forced to enter the cave to take shelter from the storm. As he entered, he discovered that what his father said was true, as there were several bottles of wine there. Then, because the air was so cold, Rip drank some of the wine to warm himself up, and then fell asleep until the morning. The next morning, as he woke up, Rip found that the area around him had changed drastically, and that caused him to get lost in the forest for 2 days until he finally managed to reach Sarah's farm in a daze and very hungry. After he thought about everything that had happened, Rip finally realized that the cave was actually a portal through time. He had entered the cave in the year 1787 and came out in the year 2022, meaning that he had traveled 235 years into the future. He also believed it was very likely that his father had also experienced the same thing, meaning his father did not actually sleep for 20 years, but had simply traveled 20 years into the future. Unfortunately, even though Rip explained his theory wholeheartedly, Sarah and Calvin found it very hard to believe him. Therefore, Sarah planned to take him to a specialist in New York for a medical evaluation because she simply thought he was confused. The next day, everything on the farm went on as usual. Rip worked the land while he occasionally accompanied Henry to play, and this made the two of them become very close to each other. On the other hand, although Sarah was still skeptical about the story that Rip told her, she did not deny that he was starting to become a part of their life. He adapted to their routine, and this made her feel like she had a new member in her family. One day, when Rip found out that Henry was often bullied at school, he taught the boy some self-defense techniques so that Henry could defend himself if he needed to.
I can teach you ways to defend yourself.
Thanks to this closeness, Henry felt like he had finally found the father figure he never had. At the same time, Sarah started to feel the same way about Rip. Since Rip turned out to be a very good trader, he often helped Sarah sell all her farm produce to the local community, and without her noticing it, a feeling of love began to grow within her as she spent more time with him. 1 week later, Sarah took Rip to New York for the medical checkup. Upon their arrival there, Rip was amazed by the tall buildings and was surprised that humans had managed to build such large structures. When they arrived at the medical facility, the doctor performed a physical examination and then hypnotized Rip to confirm his story. However, even though he was hypnotized, Rip still told the exact same story as before. After the session, the doctor told Sarah that no patient had ever stayed so consistent while being hypnotized. She explained that some people experience severe delusions as if they were living a different life, but in Rip's case, what he told might have actually happened. Moreover, the results of Rip's physical examination also revealed the fact that there was a bullet lodged in his body, proving his story about his service in the Delaware War, causing the doctor to wonder how he was able to survive for so long with it. What surprised the doctor even more was that the bullet was a type that was only used in a war that took place in the 1700s, which was around 250 years ago. The doctor then suggested that Sarah take Rip to meet a quantum physics professor, because perhaps he could explain the time travel phenomenon that Rip experienced. Sarah did the exact thing the doctor told her, and took Rip to meet a quantum physics professor to tell the story. After hearing the story, the professor put forward a theory, explaining that it was possible that the area around the cave, where Rip sheltered from the rain, contained rare elements, such as radioactive materials like uranium. He added that while a thunderstorm struck the area, the energy from the lightning shook those elements and created a huge explosion of energy that caused a distortion of space and time, which created a temporary wormhole that connected two different eras. That was why when Rip came out of the cave, he did not realize that he had just passed through a time portal. However, because the tear in space and time was temporary, the professor explained that the portal might have disappeared, meaning that Rip could not return to his original time. He said this could only happen again if the exact same thunderstorm occurred in the cave area. Despite everything that had happened, Rip expressed his deep gratitude to Sarah because she was generous and willing to trust him. He also thanked her for giving him the opportunity to do useful things in this new world. On the other hand, since meeting Rip, Sarah felt that there had been a major change in her life. Everything became more fun for her, perhaps because of the feeling of loneliness that had not been cured for so long, or maybe because she had started to open her heart to a man again. Meanwhile, on the other hand, Rip admired Sarah because, for a man living in the 18th century, her kindness and independence were qualities that were uncommon in women back then. One day, Ted came to Sarah's house to ask how she was doing, because it had been a long time since she made a report about Rip. Upon meeting, he explained to Sarah that as a police officer, he felt that it was his duty to uncover Rip's background, especially because he was worried that Rip was a con artist who wanted to take advantage of Sarah. However, in reality, he was just jealous because she was so close to Rip. Upon hearing that, Sarah really appreciated the concern, but she asked him to stop being suspicious because Rip was not what he thought. Later, in the evening, the family went to a local festival to enjoy the night with the villagers, and when the two of them were busy dancing, Ted suddenly came and asked to take a turn dancing with her. Elsewhere at the festival, Calvin was arguing with a fraudulent collector named Waylon, who claimed that his merchandise consisted of rare antiques from the 1700s. So, as someone who was actually born in that era, Rip told the crowd that what Waylon was selling were just everyday farming tools and explained exactly how to use them so that the villagers would not be fooled by the scam.
This man is charging for items for which he is... It is a child's toy.
Later that night, upon arriving home, Rip thanked Sarah again for treating him like her own family. He told her that she had an extraordinary life, an obedient son, and a very caring father. Then, because it was already late, he said goodbye and started to head back to his cabin. However, just as he was about to leave, Sarah suddenly chased after him and hugged him in the drizzling rain. Their intimate moment was accidentally witnessed by Ted, who had secretly followed Sarah home. Filled with anger and intense jealousy, he then confronted Rip at his cabin not long after and warned him that a man with an unclear identity should not be bothering a good family. Additionally, he also claimed he could not find any files showing that the man had ever served in the military and called him a liar. He told Rip that Rip's story about fighting for American freedom was just nonsense and that it could tarnish the reputation of the family if known by people, so he insisted that if Rip really loved the woman, he should listen to his words and stay away from Sarah and her family. What Ted said that night remained in Rip's mind, and he began to wonder if staying in this time and place was the right decision, or if it was time for him to return to his own era. One morning, while it was drizzling, Rip left a farewell letter for Sarah. In the letter, he explained how he felt guilty for not being able to explain his origins and expressed his worry that his presence would get her family into trouble, so he decided to return to where he belonged. Sarah did not understand why he suddenly wrote a letter like that, especially since he had promised not to leave her the night before. She then suspected that he wanted to go back to the past, so she rushed to follow him to look for the cave he had described. While trying to find the cave, the rain fell even harder, but Sarah did not care and continued to find the man she loved, until finally, she found him sitting alone inside the cave, looking sad and guilty. She then asked him why he had left her, so Rip admitted that he just did not want to cause trouble for her family. He realized that what Ted said was true, that he didn't belong here, and that was why he felt he had to go back to where he came from. However, Sarah strongly denied this and told him that Ted's opinions had nothing to do with her family affairs. She explained that his presence at home actually brought happiness to Henry, to her father, and to herself. She then told him that she believed there was a purpose behind his arrival in the future, and she even said that if he forced himself to leave, she and her family would go with him into the past. Sarah's words touched Rip deeply, because, for the first time, he could finally understand how much he meant to her and her family. In the end, they both decided to return home together. However, just as they stepped out of the cave, lightning struck the ground nearby. In that moment, Rip suddenly remembered that he had left his bag inside the cave, so he went back to get it. But when he looked inside, he saw that his bag had disappeared and was nowhere to be found. He finally realized that his bag might have traveled back in time to the past. The scene then shifted back to the year 1787. Ever since hearing the mysterious story about the cave, Rip had simply disappeared from the village. So his father, Rip Sr., became suspicious that his son had gone to the cave above the valley to prove it himself. To make sure, he then went to the cave himself, and once he entered the cave, he found the bag that belonged to his son. Inside it was a diary that Rip had written during his stay on the farm with Sarah. Rip Sr. read every page carefully and was surprised to find out that his son had traveled to the future. He also noticed that his son had finally found love and true happiness in that new world. In that moment, even though many people did not believe his own story, he felt a sense of relief knowing that his son was okay somewhere. On the other hand, back in the year 2022, Rip and Sarah finally decided to get married, and together with Henry and Calvin, they lived a happy life. proving that love can even transcend time itself.
Across the years, across the line, our hearts collide, your hand in mine. Time can't steal what we've found. Love's the only sound. I feel you here, I feel you near. No fear, just us, so clear. Ripping time, you're all I need. Love beyond the speed of dreams.